Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. It's 311 Reporting and Data Collection. This is the fourth in a series providing a look into the building blocks of 311s in North America. In the coming months, we will build on these topics covering different aspects of 311 from the ground up. We welcome you to attend all or any that interest you, and please visit our website, the CS Week 311 Synergy Group website, for the full schedule and register for upcoming webinars. Our speakers today are Dennis Linders, County Stat Analyst from the Montgomery County Stat Office, Leslie Hamm, Director of MC311 from the MC311 Customer Service Center, and Michael Quinn, Enterprise Architect with the City of Austin. They will be discussing their 311 reporting and data collection today. So what is 311? Well, we're an industry networking group for the current and prospective 311 customer contact managers throughout North America. There's a lot of information sharing, education, and it's a lot of fun. This group is open to all municipalities with an interest in 311. Our 2015 chairperson is Leslie Hamm, 311 Director of MC311 Montgomery County, Maryland. The 311 Synergy Group invites you to join us for our annual 311 Synergy meeting in Phoenix, Arizona, next year, April 24th through 26th, 2016. It's a 3-day event packed with great sessions that we can all benefit from, and we hope to see you there. The 311 Synergy Group also has a LinkedIn. Please join us on LinkedIn for industry news and networking. During the presentation, if you have any questions, please upload your questions to the Q&A panel, and remember to select all panelists so that everyone can see them, and we will address your questions at the end of the presentation where we have allotted time for questions and answers. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dennis Linders and Leslie Hamm from Montgomery County. MC311 is a recipient of the Citizen Engaged Community Award from the Public Technology Institute for their CRM, mobile communications, web portal, Search Montgomery, and customer engagement teams since 2012. They've also received the Innovation Achievement Award in 2013 for their Customer Service Center and website from the National Association of Counties, the CRM Excellence Award for Customer Analytics at the Silver level in 2011 from Gartner and One-to-One Media, and the Technology Solutions Award for Telecommunications and Information Technology of populations of 750,000 plus from the Public Technology Institute for 2010 and 2011. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you, Lisa. This is Leslie Hamm. I'm going to get us started. We took a slightly different slant for the data and collection and reporting. We focused on how to get this information to the VIPs, so how to get the VIPs to the 311. All right, so the first question is, what does our executive leadership want to know? And this is the data-driven decision-making. So one of the things the department wants to know, and probably the most important thing, is how's their department doing? And this data can share that with them. It also is an avenue for doing results-based budgeting. Can we use the data to justify those additional resources that they're requesting? What about gaps in service? I know that's been something over the past 5 years that we've been in operation where folks will say, wow, we really do need more folks on that because more people are calling about it than we knew before when we were not tracking those kinds of services. The other piece is resource allocation. Do you have millions of dollars set aside for something that you always underspend, but there's something else that could use that money? So it's really taking a look during the budget preparation process to make decisions on where the resources should go, so we're good public stewards. The other way that we use it is in real-time data. So during our emergency response support events, we are essential employees, and so we do activate. We're able to send that data in real time to our Emergency Operations Center so they can help make decisions about what's going on, who needs to go where, the police need to go there, that kind of thing. All right, so our 311 data makes us efficient, transparent, and accountable. And so the window is now wide open. So prior to 311 coming into existence here in Montgomery County, Maryland, there was some tracking going on. Certainly we had performance measures and that kind of thing, but it was typically checklists, somebody's notepad, stickies on their monitor, et cetera, et cetera. Now it's, for the most part, all in one database, and so you can go in and take a look at what's there. There's no way of hiding it. For instance, maybe not purposefully, but just making it not accessible to everyone. One of the things, for instance, that surprised senior management when we first started was the number of transit complaints that we got. And there's a variety of ways that you can complain about transit behavior of the bus driver, the bus itself, the operations, that kind of thing. What was happening previously is if a complaint came in and it wasn't founded, it just went away. But now we have a service request attached to every single complaint that comes in, which is helpful for the department because they know what's really going on. But it also gives senior leadership some ideas of areas for improvement. All right, so publishing the data provides transparency and accountability. While this presentation focuses primarily on making sure that our senior management has access to it and knows how to use it, but we also provide this information to the public as well on our Data Montgomery site. As I mentioned before, absolutely every 311 contact here at MC311 results in a service request. Even if you call to ask us what time is the library open, we attach a service request to that. And that's helpful to the library. So they're saying, why are folks having to call 311 about that? Should we beef up our website a bit to make it more clear when customers can come, that kind of thing. Selected 311 service request data, including our service level agreements, is available to the public on the Open Montgomery site, which is excellent, and you can easily access that, and Dennis is going to tell you how to do that. CountyStat uses the 311 data as performance measurement criteria for department directors. So we actually just finished doing that for FY17. To take a look at, what are their headline performance measures going to be for the year, and we use the 311 data to help with that. Another thing that's helpful with the data is helping the agents understand their role and making sure that the data has integrity, is comprehensive, is accurate, is clear. And so one of the things that we've done is have our CountyStat analysts come and actually speak to the customer service representatives so they get a sense that, wow, this isn't just helping the customer, which is, of course, extremely important, but we're also a big part of generating this data that's used in so many important ways with the county. Dennis, did you have something you wanted to say about this?
Yeah, one of the things that we did for the first time this year is when we do our annual performance review looking across all the different departments, we actually switched over to using the open data set as our primary source of information for that. There are two main reasons for that. One, it's a way to, what they call in Silicon Valley, kind of eating your own dog food, kind of demonstrating the value of these things that you're releasing out to the public, and also in sort of demonstrating the confidence that we have in that data. But the second reason was also practical, because once you have it on this pretty robust open data platform, you have an API that you can use. So essentially within the tools that we use, we can automatically pull that data in kind of real time. So if new service requests come in that night, the open data set gets updated as well, and then all the charts and stuff that we've built out update along with that open data. And so that's been a huge improvement to the way that we can kind of hold departments accountable and get some insight in terms of the general performance of all the different county departments.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the next thing to talk a little bit about are the service level agreements, and this goes obviously towards that performance measurement and management piece. So departments are assigned an estimated completion time that we use to track the service request here at MC311. Basically how that happens is that the departments, and as you might imagine, this was tough in the beginning. It's kind of like having to explain to someone how to ride a bike. So if you had to list all the steps, you might find it a little bit challenging. This came to such second nature for folks that it was hard for us to say, well, how long does it really take us to fill a pothole, for instance? I'm going to pick on highway services. So they give a number. Well, I think it takes 5. It takes 5 business days to make that happen. So that's actually included in our knowledge-based article. So there's an SLA field. And so the customer service representative actually shares that with the customer. So, okay, you've got, it's going to take 5 business days. And, if it's not done by then, please give us a call back, and we're going to escalate that and see what happened with it. The other thing with the service level agreements is that they're now annually reviewed, which is a good thing. So CountyStat, and Dennis can talk a little bit about this, goes back in and takes a look at, okay, well, you said 5, but you know what? When we looked over the last year and the data, it really only took you 3 business days on average. How about we move that down to 3? So it's good on our end because, of course, customers want it fixed this afternoon. So it gives customers a sense that we are trying on a regular basis to be even more efficient and more responsive than we've been in the past. So that's actually been a real great help for us, both on both ends. One, as far as the performance piece for the different departments, and also for us, it helps us provide more realistic expectations for the customer.
Yeah, this has definitely been sort of a calibration process. So, you know, maybe initially some of the SLAs were a little bit too ambitious or a little bit too loose, but you know, once we've collected, you know, many years of data, we can look back and see what really would be a realistic time frame. We've also seen a lot of the department directors kind of embrace this and kind of go, you know what, I think we can do this in 3 days. 4 days is probably too long for this. And so the last time when we went through these revisions, we actually had quite a few departments really tighten their SLAs rather than trying to extend those out. And any of these changes that they make, they have to include a justification there too. And a lot of times we can validate that by, again, kind of diving into the data.
So we actually have 3 types of SLAs. The one we've just described is really related to the customer, so managing the customer expectations about how long the service is going to take to provide. But we also have 2 other types of SLAs, and one is our service level agreement with our participating departments. So we have MOUs for all of our participating departments, and in that, for instance, the Customer Service Center promises to have at least 95% service accuracy for service requests that we actually assign back to the department that we can't do here at 311. So if we're not meeting that, then we go back in and make some improvements. And we have some folks who are looking at the data here at 311 on a regular basis and taking a look at, hey, it looks like we're creeping up in solid waste services. How can we improve that and make it better? And then also the participating department has the SLA with us. So they promise to keep us updated with new information that they have, events that are coming up. For instance, we recently, the county recently sent out the delinquent tax bills, but somehow failed to remind us that it was going to be coming on a Monday, which is already our busiest day. So that was a little bit of a fail, but in general, they're great partners, so we're just continuing to work on improving that relationship. So you can see that there's a lot of accountability here in what we do. All right, so how are the SLAs enforced and who is the enforcer? So 311 has absolutely no enforcement authority over department, nor do I necessarily want that or anyone else here. What we will do is that we're going to escalate issues as needed. So if that person did put in that pothole request and it's not done and they give us a call back, we can work with our business analyst here at 311, and in this situation it would be Trish Jenkins, one of our business analysts for Department of Transportation, and she would get back to them and say, hey, what's going on with this? You know, why didn't it get filled? She takes it back to the department. They say, well, actually there's 6 potholes on that stretch of road, so instead of filling potholes individually, we're going to actually repave it. So then we can get back to the customer and let them know that. So we're just trying to close that loop on a regular basis. So that's what we can do here. Now, the real enforcer is our senior management. So our chief administrative officer is the one that really enforces that SLA, service level agreement adherence. And he does that through the performance reviews that we do. We were doing them all the time on an annual basis. Now they're happening kind of on a different schedule with a more specific focus, that kind of thing, or cross-cutting focuses. And then we do that through our county staff program that Dennis is here with. And the bottom line is really that directors are responsible for the SLA adherence in their department. Do you want to say anything else, Dennis, about that?
Yeah, so I'm part of this team called County Staff, which sits in the Office of the County Executive, and it's essentially for analysts that kind of dig into data from departments, and especially 311 data, to see how the county can improve in different areas. The 2 main ways that we use 311 for accountability is, first, we do it at the department level, where every year, every department director sits down with the county executive and the chief administrative officer, and they walk through what we call kind of the performance plan, where we've compiled information about their performance for the past year, but also their ideas and plans for how they can do better the following year. And as a part of that, we have 3 or 4 pages on that department's 311 performance, so that's part of that sort of annual discussion between sort of the highest level of management with the different directors in the departments. The other thing we do, and that's going to be on the next slide, let me switch over here, is we also do kind of a county-wide review, SLA performance review of all the 311 data. And there's a couple different purposes for that. One is to sort of collectively set priorities. So are there particular departments that are having challenges, or are there specific success stories in other departments that we can apply kind of across the county? And so if you look on the right there, that's one of the kind of data products we use. So what we do is we plot the total volume of different kinds of service requests. And then on the left-hand axis, we plot how often they meet their performance targets. And so from this, you can, for instance, see how housing complaints, road repair, and pothole repair kind of stand out for being both very high volume but fairly low in terms of performance. And so within county stat, that tells us, oh, these are kind of the areas we really want to focus on for this year and to really try to kind of move the needle on that. One of the ways we do that is following this annual review meeting that we host, we'll schedule kind of joint action review meetings where, you know, if it's pothole repair, we kind of bring all the key stakeholders together around the table and talk about, you know, why are we having performance issues here, what might be some ways that we can improve here, and how can we kind of monitor this on an ongoing basis to make sure that we're seeing improvements sort of throughout the year rather than having to wait until the end to see, oh, did this improve or not. And the other thing that we'll try to use is to use our sort of the data analytics skills that we have on our team to help the department kind of make sense of the information. We have some slides at the end of this that go into that in a little bit more detail. And then all this, these performance reviews we release on a new platform we have called Open Performance, which sits on top of the Open Data platform, and that allows us to share these kind of interactive dashboards. And so those are used by the county executive for these the meetings that he has with his director every year, but that's the exact same data that we also release out to the public. So one of the real benefits of having a 3-in-1 system based on a pretty robust citizen or customer relationship management system is that you start to move towards this kind of true single point of record. And so for a lot of the performance analysis that we do, we can now go to this one system and get sort of a single source of truth and really get a sense of how well departments are performing kind of across the board. The way that this has been implemented in Montgomery County, it sort of depends a little bit on by department. So for instance, solid waste is by far the #1 driver of 301 requests. And so our solid waste team is, their case management system is the exact same system that the 301 team uses, that same CRM system. And we can kind of see all the benefits from that, where you don't have to worry about any kind of complicated system integration. When we want to do our performance reviews, all the information that we could possibly want is in that one system. Whereas with other departments, it's a little bit more of a handshake between different systems. So for instance, in code enforcement, 301 is the single intake system, so that gets us a really good sense of what the complaints are from the public, what their general demands are, but we can't necessarily get a full sense of what actually happened once the inspectors went out there and kind of how that process works. So from county staff's perspective, what we do there is we dig into the case management system too, but the closer we can get to really integrating all these different systems, the easier it is for us to kind of gather these kind of data-driven insights. And one of the key benefits of that, and again, because solid waste is in the system, they're kind of the best example of that, is they can print off different reports from this one system, bring it to the budget office and say, hey, we need a bigger budget to buy more recycle bins or whatever it might be, and they have all the evidence to kind of back that up with. And so these discussions that they have with the budget office are very kind of data-driven and objective, and usually they kind of get what they need because they have that evidence base to kind of back up their requests. Let me go to the next slide. Some of the key benefits, again, from having this single point of record is, one, from the executive team's perspectives and from the department, we can track pretty much all communication that's happening between citizens and the county government. And this isn't in some system that's buried deep into a department that would be difficult to potentially get access to. This is in the central enterprise system that county staff has full access to, and departments have access to their kind of their slice of that system. The other benefit from the customer perspective is that because all these interactions they've had with the county are recorded in this one system, they can just provide the the serial number for their request, service request number, and then the call operators can look that up and know exactly what past interactions they've had. And so one that eliminates the need for the resident to go, hey, I called 2 weeks ago, this is what we talked about. It's all kind of already documented. And so it adds that accountability, but also from a pragmatic perspective, it sort of makes that process much more efficient. And again, another key benefit of that is our budget office can look at what the different requests are that are coming from the public, sort of across all the different departments, and go, oh, it looks like there's a lot of new demand for this area. Maybe we need to kind of shift some resources around there. And so one key aspect of this is to make sure that our departments and executives and also frontline workers kind of have access to a lot of this information to use it to inform the work that they do. And so one key way to do that is, again, with this central CRM system, we also have a central reporting tool built on top of that. This is the Oracle Business Intelligence Platform. And then all the kind of key stakeholders have access to at least their slice of the pie so that they can go in there, generate reports, get a sense of what the historical trends might be, et cetera. Then another big aspect that Leslie focuses on quite a bit is to provide this kind of enterprise-wide training, clear user guidance, and making it sort of as easy as possible for people to make use of these tools. But part of that is also trying to kind of promote some changes in the culture where we try and encourage people to become as data-driven as possible. Some of these tools can also be somewhat intimidating, and that's kind of where the training comes in. But what we also found very helpful is sort of this last point, which is providing some centralized analytical support so that all the different county stat analysts can help our departments to really dig into this data. And one of the main reasons we do that is, one, to give them sort of some initial insights in terms of how they could potentially do their jobs better or better understand the trends that the data is sort of indicating, but also really to use it as a demonstration project so that people go, oh, wow, I didn't know that we could get these kind of insights from this data, and I should really, attend another training session, get more familiar with these tools, because this is not just something that, county stat uses for accountability or that call center operators use on an individual case basis. This is really information that can help me do my job better.
Actually, one of the things before we leave this slide that's been really, really helpful is that County Stat agreed, I guess starting last year, that they would actually run those service level agreement performance reports and send them out to the department. So certainly they're available online. Anyone could go and look at them. But County Stat sends not only the total, all the department's performance in a bar graph, but also you get your individual department performance, SLA performance reports. And it's pretty clear if you're not meeting at least 80%. And so that's been a great help for 311 because we don't necessarily have the bandwidth here to have somebody who can run the reports for all their departments and send that out. So having that happen on a quarterly basis has actually significantly improved the SLA performance, as you might guess. So that's been very helpful.
Yeah, and because we have the benefit of sitting in the office of the county executive, we send these reports directly to the directors, and they're color-coded and stuff. So just instantly looking at the report, you get a sense of what the general performance is. And then usually the director will say, hey guys, what's going on? Why are we in red here? And we also make sure to include some documentation that sort of a user guide for how people log into the system. And then magically people get very interested about knowing how to log into these systems, get a better grasp of this, because now their director is asking them why they're in the red for a certain area. And because we do this on a quarterly basis rather than just every year, it allows them to make some mid-course corrections too, so that's beneficial there. So what I want to do just real quick is give you some examples of the kinds of data products we use and the kinds of analytics that we can extract out of the 3-in-1 system that we have. So one of the things that we do, and Leslie talked about this, is just the value of even just looking at the changes in volume for different kinds of requests. So here you can see on the top line, it's the general information requests. So those are things that are answered directly in the call center. And also the service request fulfillment, which are the kinds of service requests that then get sent over to the different departments. And so from this, we can kind of get a sense in red what was happening in 2015 and compare that to 2014 in blue, 2013 in a lighter color. And so from this we can go, oh, if we look at DOT service requests, you see kind of a spike there. But then one of the good news there is you see a drop in general information requests, and that's because we've invested in sort of, mobile apps and things like that, and it seems like people are starting to use those kinds of tools, and that's relieving some of the pressure on the call center itself. The other thing that we were interested to see is, for instance, if you look at Health and Human Services, you can kind of see a spike there in their general information requests as well. So when this sort of starts to raise some red flags, some areas that we might want to look into further. So if I click here, so this is drilling down more on our Health and Human Services department. And so what you notice there, if you look at the other category, is that that's really driving a lot of the changes just in this past year. And so then we were interested to see, oh, what's actually going on here? And perhaps not surprisingly, a lot of those calls were coming about the Affordable Care Act. And so that kind of demonstrates this demand that seemingly has sort of come out of, obviously it's kind of a new legislation that was passed. So you see how that kind of goes from 0 in 2013 all the way to being one of the most requested types of services. And so that allows our budget office, Health and Human Services, kind of everyone involved to get some sense of, oh, there's a lot of demand here that we need to make sure that we have the resources to manage. And this also is a very good demonstration of the value that 301 contributes to the county, because they were essentially able to absorb all this additional volume with their existing resources, because it is this kind of centralized tool that can kind of shift. And part of the benefit is because we have fewer calls on things like bus times, because people are using apps now. It's kind of made some additional staffing resources available to handle these much more complicated kinds of calls. And that shows you the benefit of having that kind of a centralized resource. The other thing that we look at, this is what's called a tree map, which is it comes from the University of Maryland. This kind of maps out all the service requests that didn't meet their SLA. And so this kind of tells us what areas we might want to focus on, because in an ideal world, basically this chart would be completely empty, but clearly it's not. And so that allows us to go, where can we kind of focus our resources to really bring this down as much as we can and have departments be as responsive as possible. So here we can see, for instance, in the blue that DOT is by far the biggest generator. But if we look down at sort of specific areas, you see in the red that code enforcement is actually the single biggest kind of sub-area within this pool. And so that allows us to kind of prioritize the departments that we want to work with to try and move the needle on their general performance. The other thing that we can do there is we can slice and dice the data in many different ways. So this is looking at department SLA performance and then looking at it by all the different council districts. So are certain geographic areas seeing better performance than other areas? In general, we were pleased to see that that really wasn't the case. But again, we have that ability to kind of check on that, which is always good to see. And then this last one that gets a little bit technical, but one of the things that we're very interested in, especially when we're trying to determine whether we should increase or decrease service level agreement in terms of the number of days that a department takes to perform a certain action, having just that single number to hit at, or 3 days or 4 days, doesn't give you a full sense of really what the general performance is of that department. So what we do is instead of this, we kind of plot these different curves so that we can see how many of these service requests did they actually complete 2 days ahead of time or 1 day ahead of time, or how many of these does it take them more than an additional 2 or 3 days, et cetera. And so that really allows us to kind of calibrate and get some sense of, if a department asks to increase or decrease one, if that's something that's reasonable or not. And then again, we can track it by different months of the year. So are there certain months where this performance is much poorer than other months? We can look at it by council district, by the different cities in our county. And so again, that gives us some sense as to what the different kind of variables might be in terms of that performance. And to kind of help departments optimize both their SLA window, but also get a sense of when they might be struggling and when it might make sense to maybe have like a resource discussion or something like that. And so this last slide, what we're trying to do more and more is to really empower departments to use a lot of this information. So what we're trying to do now is to build out different kinds of visualizations and dashboards and things like that that people out in the field can also make use of. So this, for instance, gives you a sense of both the volume, the sources of where this is coming from, whether it's coming through the web or the call center or from internal systems. Gives you a sense of which zip codes see the most activity, so that's something very useful to departments to see when they sort of update their strategy or what have you. And then also just kind of looking at the trends over time and by months. And certainly for a lot of the different types of requests that we see, they're very cyclical, and it's important to be aware of that also, rather than only just looking at that single annual performance number. So that's the end of my portion here.
All right, so thank you, Dennis. And now we're going to turn it over to Michael Quinn from Austin.
Thank you, everybody. So for the city of Austin, I'm sure this is the same for other cities across the country, we find ourselves in a situation where reporting on your organization's data has only become more important over time. We see this effect in the open data initiatives many cities are now participating in, including Austin. And that's because our citizens, our council members, our departments, and even our internal groups within our 3-in-1 centers, they all have a greater interest in data. They all want to know more about how 3-in-1 performs its job. They want to know more about their city, and they're becoming more informed over time. And 3-in-1 centers tend to be at the center of these issues, primarily because 3-in-1 has heightened visibility. 3-in-1 centers often are the interface between citizens and the city, and as such, reporting on your performance, reporting on your data is a way for citizens to understand more about how the city operates in general. The problem with that, though, is that as organizations collect data, they're collecting data in lots of different ways. Some organizations, we're still collecting data manually through paper, still being tracked in filing cabinets. And then we also collect a lot of data automatically through systems. So Austin, 3-in-1, we have a CRM that collects our data for us, and we have to then find a way to combine that data to make sense of the enormous amounts of data that we have, as well as the different types of data. And that creates a challenge for us. And that challenge, I believe, is a 4-part challenge, which is we have to understand our data. We have to make sure that we're collecting the right data. We're looking at data that's significant, data that's important and not trivial. We have to figure out how we manage our data. And then finally, how do we communicate our data in the best way, whether that's going to be through a report, through a dashboard, or through like an open data platform. And the thing about each of these challenges is that they are all significant, and they could all merit individual discussions. So what Austin chose to do today for our data collection and reporting webinar was we wanted to focus on the understanding data part, because we really believe that understanding our data is the foundation for data collection and for reporting. Once you understand your data, you can then determine whether or not you're collecting that data, whether that data is being managed properly, and you can figure out the best ways to distribute that data out. So for Austin, our solution that we actually went with is we joined into the City of Austin's Enterprise Architecture Initiative. So enterprise architecture may be new to some people on this call. It was new to Austin 3-in-1 2 years ago. That's when we actually started looking at enterprise architecture, and we actually started a process of developing enterprise architecture at Austin 3-in-1. So before I get into Austin's processes and show you some examples, I wanted to give you all a brief overview of what enterprise architecture is and some of its benefits. So enterprise architecture is really a way and a methodology for requirements gathering. It's a way for us to define our system and our business requirements, and to do that in a way that is easily communicatable across departments and with different people. One of the benefits of enterprise architecture is that it helps align your information technology and business units. There are times when IT and business units tend to be at odds, but really, as we become more automated, as we use systems to track information more, we become more IT dependent. So it's important that IT and the business unit are in sync about what they want and what information is important to them to gather. And enterprise architecture is a way to help facilitate those discussions. Enterprise architecture is also helpful to identify common capabilities, areas of overlap, places where groups might do similar work. It can pull that information out that's not easily understood, and then now we have a way of having focused discussions about if two groups pick up garbage in the city, is it really best that both groups pick up garbage, or is there a way to simplify this process? Is there a way that we can save the citizens money, we can improve our business processes? One of the nice things about enterprise architecture is that it's actually an industry standard at this point. It's been around for approximately 20 years now, and it's understood by major information technology vendors. It's understood by other enterprise architecture organizations. It's understood by other enterprise architects. So we're creating processes, we're defining things in a way that is reusable across the industry. People are going to be able to understand what we're saying and how we're saying it. Enterprise architecture helps provide standardized documentation, drawings, and blueprints. So everything we create is going to be created at an industry standard so that we can ensure that we get maximum understanding from everybody that we send our information to. And lastly, enterprise architecture is data focused. And so our discussion today is about data collection and reporting, and EA, enterprise architecture, is all about data. The entire enterprise architecture process is built around understanding how your enterprise, how your processes, how your systems use your data. What data is important to your enterprise, how is that data created, how is that data modified, how is it changed, and how does it look as it moves through your enterprise. Because ultimately, when we talk about processes, when we talk about reporting, we're interested in the data. And processes exist to transform data. That's one of the core principles of enterprise architecture, is that data changes. So we have to understand how it changes, and once we understand that, we can then talk about data and how to send that out to the appropriate people. So the enterprise architecture process, the way this works at the City of Austin is that we have structured discussions that are facilitated by an enterprise architect. And through these sessions, we create use cases and diagrams to describe a process or describe a system. After we create those diagrams, we then develop data models. So we talk about your data and how your data connects to different pieces of data. And once we identify those data relationships, we can then make sure that when we talk about data, we have the complete picture about what that data influences throughout your organization. Enterprise architecture is also business user driven. So when we have these meetings, we have these facilitated sessions, the enterprise architect isn't defining anything. We're not creating information, we are merely facilitating that information from the business users. So when I show you the example from Austin 301 in a few slides, the important thing to keep in mind with there is that all of that information was provided by the business users directly. They gave me everything that's on all of the drawings that we'll see, all of the text, they provided that themselves. And since they provide that information, that then helps business users begin to own their process and own the responsibility for their data. So there's less chance that a user is going to come back and say, well, that's not my process, primarily because they were in the meetings and they helped define the process themselves. They were there every step of the way. There's no ambiguity about who made those decisions. It's not the architect, it's the business user. Okay. All right, so now that we have a little background on enterprise architecture, a crash course in it, if you will, we'll take a look at an example from Austin 301. And this example was created earlier this year. I worked directly with Richard Castillo and his team, the staff development team, who's responsible for managing our 3-in-1 ambassadors. And we looked at a process for how they respond to feedback from citizens or departments about their ambassadors' performance. And our goals are to understand the data in the process, to identify the significant data, and then determine the data to report on. So we'll go through that process, and then you'll see how those goals are being accomplished through enterprise architecture. So what I have here is an example of an activity diagram. It shows the different steps that happen during the process. So this is how the staff development group resolves behavior feedback. And it's going to look very similar to a Visio process flow that you might see from other people. But the main difference is you'll notice that there are green boxes throughout this process. And those green boxes is actually your data. So that's the data for this process as it moves through the process. So for example, if you look on the left side under the QC specialist column, you'll see that we have a step called create EUF evaluation. So that's an end user feedback evaluation. What we have here is we have a box that with a line going in that shows that that's the information that comes in to start the process. So we can't start this step until we get a service request for feedback. And then we have a box coming out called EUF evaluation. So the main deliverable that comes out of it, that step is EUF evaluation. It seems self-explanatory, but there are going to be other times when you have a process and a piece of data may not be obvious that it's needed, and this is a way to make that data explicit so that there's no question about what data you need to do the process. It's always going to be illustrated for you. And the nice thing about this diagram is that it now lets us follow the chain of data across the entire process so that we can see that a service request comes in, it goes into the create EUF evaluation step, it then gets reassigned for the next step to review feedback and determine validity, and we can follow that chain and we can see as new data is created throughout our process. This is also a way for us to identify important data. So all the data on here was important data that the staff development group at Austin 3-in-1 said was important for them to complete their job. They could not complete this process unless they had all of this information every time they did their stuff. Enterprise architecture also provides written descriptions of everything. So on the previous slide, we had a step called create EUF evaluation. As part of that, we get a scope statement that talks about who does the step, how do they do it, what information, what data is important to them, what data do they have to create or modify as part of their step, what's their deliverable. And what I've done is I've gone through and I've highlighted in red the different pieces of data that is important to each of these steps. Then again, this is all information that came directly from the business users. I didn't inject any of my own personal opinion into this. This was all what they said was important to them. And then finally, what we end up with is a data model, which begins to describe the data and how the data connects to itself. So you'll see here that we have a block called service request 3-in-1 feedback. So that's the service request we create in our system when somebody reports feedback to us. We also see that we have the EUF evaluation showing up on the drawing. And then we see that feedback itself is composed of multiple parts. And each of these lines have a meaning, but the important thing to understand is that we can now show the relationship between data. So you can't have a service request for feedback unless you also had feedback. And if you have feedback, then there's extra information you want to capture for that feedback. You want to find out what the root cause was. You want to talk about what actions you took, which group was responsible for solving that feedback, who was the person that was submitting it, what's their name, their phone number. This is all information that's very important to Austin 3-in-1 to ensuring that when we get feedback from a citizen about how we perform our jobs, we can complete that feedback and we can close that loop with that person. And enterprise architecture has now given us a way to focus our discussions on the lowest level possible. So now when we talk about feedback, we know at the molecular level what feedback means and what feedback is composed of. And finally, what I have here is a sample report from Austin 301 that we run to determine feedback type and root cause of feedback. As shown in our data model on the last slide, feedback type was an important piece of information that we wanted to capture for feedback when it came in, and this report has a column for the different types of feedback. Before enterprise architecture, it would be difficult for us to understand exactly what we should be reporting on. But since the staff development group identified feedback type as an important piece of information, we can now build reports that talk about feedback type. And it's now providing the important information to them as opposed to reporting on something that they're not. They don't use throughout their process. So without our enterprise architecture, Austin would have difficulty understanding the data that we should capture. We could capture data that's not important, and we could report on data that's not relevant to our business users. So our main goal through the enterprise architecture was to develop that process and then provide our business users with the data they really need to do their jobs to the best of their ability. So in conclusion, City of Austin and Austin 301, we're using enterprise architecture as a process to begin to understand our data. And that's now laying the foundation for Austin 301 to collect the right data, to help manage that data, and then finally report on the data that's significant to our processes. Enterprise architecture is not simple. There's a lot of information that goes into that. There's a lot of work. The City of Austin has been doing this for about 5 years now. And the City of Austin's enterprise architecture team actually has a website that provides a lot more detailed information than what I could discuss today. So I've listed the URL here. It has several different essays by the Chief IT Enterprise Architect, Rob Bird. He describes enterprise architecture. He goes very in-depth to talk about how the process works, and he describes a lot of its benefits. You also can see like real-world examples of enterprise architecture from the City of Austin. So you can see how different departments are using it. You can see the data, how data is collected, and how it's transformed through those processes and through those drawings. So Austin, we don't anticipate that a lot of cities are going to be able to run out today and go create an enterprise architecture program. It does take time. It does take an investment. But there are some tips that you can then apply to yourselves to help improve your data collection, your data reporting processes. And one of the first ones is you want to focus on data when discussing processes rather than process steps. A lot of us are trained to think about processes as step 1, we do this, step 2, we do that, step 3, we do something else. But if you were to look at those steps as step 1, we produce this piece of data, step 2, we're using a piece of data from step 1 and we're producing some other piece of data, that's really going to help you identify the data that's important to you. And identifying the data elements should really be your primary objective whenever you develop processes, whenever you start talking about reports. You want to understand how your data changes throughout your process. When does data get created? When does it get modified? And you want to do that every step of the process. You want to create data relationships. You want to show that chain of one piece of data depending on another piece of data. And then finally, the more you understand your data and the more thorough you are in understanding how it connects to other data and how it's used, that can only improve other aspects of your data collection and reporting processes. It's never going to decrease your capability to report on or collect data. It can only help you understand and report on your data more accurately or report on data that's more important to people. If there's any questions, feel free to reach out to Austin 311. I'm the enterprise architect for the city of, or for Austin 311, but we also have enterprise architects for the entire city, Rob Burr, who's the chief IT architect, as well as Aaron Brown, who's the senior IT architect. And any of those three would be more than happy to discuss enterprise architecture with you and provide assistance as needed.
Well, thank you, Michael, for that glimpse into the City of Austin reporting and data collection. So at this time, we'll begin to field the questions. And I did have a couple of them coming in already, but I just wanted to remind the attendees that if you would, please upload your questions in the Q&A panel and mark them for all participants so that we can all see the questions, as I may not be privy to everything that's come in so far. Let's see, we have the first one is, it came in for Montgomery County, and it's asking, what is your process for releasing 311 data to the public via open data?
And can everyone hear me okay? Yeah, it looks like it's working. So the county has we have a countywide strategy for our open data platform. And within that, we have what's called an ETL team, so extract, transform, load. And they've been working with the 311 team to identify which data fields that they want to bring open to the open data platform. We've gone through 2 different iterations of that, so I think now we're pretty much at the point where we want to be with sort of the richness of the data that we're releasing. And essentially what happens is there's an automated process that at the end of the day kind of collects all the service request information and releases that out to the public. So it's sort of almost real time where overnight it gets updated. I don't know, Leslie, if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, that's a good description.
Okay, very wonderful. So I had a question come in for Austin, and it's asking, how many departments utilize this method today?
Enterprise architecture is used through several departments. Right now, the architecture team is actually focused on projects. So they work on singular projects with different departments throughout the city, and they have approximately 10 to 15 projects going simultaneously.
Okay, sounds good. And then let's see, I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions that we've had come in. For Montgomery County, it's asking, what kind of tools, staff, and resources are required to implement an effective reporting and accountability system?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
It says, what kind of tools, staff, and resources are required to implement an effective reporting and accountability system?
Okay. Well, I guess that can be answered a couple of ways. We're really fortunate here at NC 311. We have a group of business analysts who have subject matter expertise with some of the bigger departments in their portfolios. They help us by doing, if you're sort of looking at internal data, they help us by doing a quality assurance review, of the service request data that we have internally. We also are fortunate enough to have 3 folks detailed here from our Department of Technology Services who help, with things like troubleshooting, but also other types of things as well. So we're really lucky there. And then we have an amazing relationship with county staff. Dennis is one of the county analysts. When they're fully staffed, they have 4 analysts and a director. So those are some of the resources that we have available to help us work through these things.
Yeah, and then in terms of tools, obviously you need to have that foundational CRM system in place that sort of collects and generates a lot of this data. But in terms of making sense of that information, one, it's sort of these some kind of business intelligence platform where people can do the kind of reporting that they need to do. But what we've been working with the last year is using what they call kind of a data discovery tool. So there's different options there. We use Tableau, but there's also Power BI, which is built into Microsoft Excel now, Click, Spotfire, tools like that. And that's really allowed us to do a lot of the kind of deep dives to identify where there may be certain issues that we want to address with the departments themselves. And so BI is great for kind of like standardized reports and stuff. A data discovery tool like Tableau really allows you to kind of zoom in and out of different areas if you sort of have a hint of some issue that you might want to dive more deeply into, you can do that just with a couple of clicks. And so that's been a very welcome addition to the general tool set that we have.
Okay, wonderful. Well, now that we're at the top of the hour, I wanted to thank Montgomery County and the Austin 311 for presenting today on the reporting and data collection. So if your question wasn't answered, please send Amber Weems with the CS Week office will forward your questions to the presenters and for post-webinar follow-up. This webinar will be recorded and available later this afternoon on the CS Week website in the 311 Synergy webinar location. Just scroll down there and you'll see the webinar icon there, and that's where you'll locate it. The 311 Synergy Group is searching for webinar presenters from across 311 centers from across North America to take part in the 311 Building Block Series. Take this opportunity to showcase your center's best practices. The next upcoming topics are 311 dashboards and report cards, training, quality of work life, and coaching processes. And if you're interested, please contact Amber Weems with the CS Week office. And at this time, I'd like to thank you for joining us today and participating in the 311 Building Block Series. We look forward to seeing you at the next webinar on Thursday, January 14th, discussing 311 dashboards and report cards, and hopefully at the 311 Synergy Group meeting in Phoenix. Thank you, and this will conclude our webinar.